Hey Joe, how's it going?
Oh, it's going good, man. That intro song rules. I'm gonna be digging those guys up later tonight to listen to.
Cool. Yeah, the band is Blind Idiot God. The song is called Freaked. So uh, I saw your art and I was like, I gotta open with something that rocks. So um, get people pumped up and ready.
Hey, it's appropriate.
um, People in the chat already looking forward to the stream. So we've got Wilberforce Wooster reminding everybody to f off well read. So that's sound advice.
How dare
Uh,
you, Wooster? Jesus.
That was actually the old name of the channel. So
Oh
people,
well. A
yeah,
little
people,
well-read lore.
yeah, exactly. People would come in and, they liked trolling the hosts. So I just went with it. Um, and I named the channel after that. We've also got Jack Stafford, Ahoy Ninja Balls. Ahoy. It's great to have you, Jack. And
What up,
Dale
man?
A. Well read going up against Malin. Yeah, mail-in is streaming, but we gotta follow up with Joe. I mean, we missed a chance to talk to you last time, and really needed to catch up and see how things are going.
Malin's on YouTube all the time. It's not even a big deal anymore. It's all about
Yeah,
Joe Ball now.
exactly. This is the Joe Ball era,
Yeah,
so we got to get with the times.
yeah, yeah. Be hip. Come on, guys.
Yeah, we can't be stagnant. Got to evolve. Um, Speaking of evolving, I quickly wanted to show. So Ethan launched Cyberfog 2, the second chance, today. So quickly just give people notice of that. 637 backers already, 84K raised, and a bunch of new variant covers on this. So um, something for people to check out and jump in back. This is the chance to get into Wreck Planet if you missed it the first time around. So did you get a chance to grab your copy of Wreck Planet, Joe, or maybe you'll check out the
No,
second
I
chance?
Shane bought 2 copies. He's gonna give me one.
Oh,
Shane,
you've got
that's my business partner. Well, luckily he gets on a lot of like there's some campaigns where I'll back it just for the sake of making sure it's getting extra money, and then there's others where he's like, I got it. I'll make sure I get you a copy. So we kind of go
cool.
back and forth on that stuff.
Yeah, we're trying to get on the artists comp list here because I know that there's books that go around. Hey, Matthew Fowler, welcome. Matthew, if you had a few questions for Joe after reading Bullet Maker, you're welcome to jump in.
Oh
Just let
yeah,
me
I'd
know.
love to have Fowler on. He's one of my all-time favorite YouTube personalities. I know he's probably like, I ain't no YouTube personality, but I just love listening to him talk.
Yeah, Fowler's always bringing the heat. He's packing boner juice. Um,
Well, he's just full of knowledge too. Like, respect that guy's brain because it's a big one.
sure, he's old school CG.
Yeah.
He knows what's up. Crazy Mad, welcome. Thank you for being
Day
here.
Crazy Mad, that's one of my hometown brothers. So I love Crazy Mad.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, we had a chance with Matthew and Moonshine to talk about. Oh, he's hanging out tonight. So, Moonshine and Fowler, we
Fowler.
talked.
Why Fowler? Why?
We talked about Bullet Maker on the last review,
Yeah,
and that was the book we were hoping to touch base with you on.
sure.
People, I mean, as always, like people really dug the art. Um, and there were some like questions about the creative process, but
Yeah,
I think one of the main things that stuck out was so Fowler had a copy that kind of couldn't quite hold it together. Maybe he was doing odd and unusual things to his book. I don't know, but we are wondering who the printer was for that comic.
I honestly couldn't tell you that, man. I don't know.
Uh,
But you're right about the comic. I watched it fall apart as well. there's
yeah,
there's no um there's no sugarcoating that one. I don't know what anyone else's have been like because nobody's really told me other than sending me like a nice message about the art or the story, something polite. But
right.
yeah, I'm not sure to tell you the truth. Like I draw the pictures, I get paid, and then I move on with life. So I couldn't really I can't tell you that side of the process. It's just not information I'm privy to.
Right. Yeah, it was scary bad. And I mean, there was a printer's name that we thought was the one who handled actually doing the production for that book, but
Yeah.
we didn't want to like misassociate anybody. Like if that's not the actual printer, we were throwing a name out there, so it's
Oh,
better
I
to just
understand. Yeah.
yeah, no, for sure.
Well, here's
But
the thing. It's like sometimes you'll hear a printer brought up from somebody that maybe had a bad experience, but you don't hear like the 98% of good experience people have with the same exact printer. And I think part of that too is so many printers like they divvy out work third party style, and I think it causes like quality control issues, to be honest, because that's part of why it's hit and miss. Is when someone like Bancroft is trying to get something done as close to Australia as possible, if an American or Canadian printer is having a company out of some part of Europe actually do the work, I think unless it's just way far off from the proofs, I don't know how you keep track of it all. Like respect to people that get printing done offshore to an extreme point and are comfortable with it, because it would make even me nervous, to be honest.
yeah, especially nowadays, like shipping delays and all that stuff. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure in some areas it's not as bad as others, but like there's just at this point, like personally, if it was up to me, well, for my comic book, it is. I'm gonna be searching for making sure the printer is able to do it either in the U.S. or Canada, and because I'm not super picky about which, I just want to know it's close to home. It's like within a reasonable distance. Because in all fairness, I could drive to Canada in like half a day if I had to, but I don't want to. So we're going to try to keep it in the States as much as possible, even if it costs a little bit more, because I'm a person that doesn't mind paying for A, convenience, and B, security. So I'd rather spend extra money than have to be stressed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like in Reni's case, I don't know if you heard her story with her printer, where there was damage on some of the books, and then they were giving her a hard time about a refund or reprinting, even though
Oh
they
yeah,
messed up. Yeah,
yeah, and I mean, I kind of lean towards what some of the early thoughts were about that maybe being on purpose. In terms of just avoiding her and trying to pretend like it was dealt with even when it wasn't, kind of thing. I can understand her frustration because you just don't know these days. Like, people are weird. You wouldn't think it'd be a printer, like an issue you'd have with a printer, because it's so um, uncommon to have something like that happen. But you just never know. People are strange out there, world, man. So that sucks, though. It's totally unprofessional what they did. Because I mean, it's not like she was sending them a comic book called, the Glorious KKK or something
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
Right?
No.
Like if it's something super out of hand, I can understand being like, I don't want my print shop attached to that. But we're talking about a fantasy manga comic that's about as normal and clean in terms of there's nothing super offensive about it. It's just not something society's going to have a problem with in a general way. So,
Yeah, yeah. I feel like you and I, the last time you were here, we talked a little bit about how if you have nonconformist kind of outside views, that's you're getting shunned a lot in a lot of places nowadays. There's a lot of gatekeeping and uh, almost like witch hunts that happen. Like if you're part of some group that doesn't hold to certain conventions or certain ideas. So
I think
Rini,
it's less bad, but it's still very much a problem. You know what I mean? It's
you
not that it
think
went away, but I think it's the risk factor right now is less than it's been since like 2016, because it's just gotten to a point where I think a certain amount of normies in this world have gotten just fed up with ultra leftist and um, SJWs as much as everyone else, and they're starting to fall on deaf ears. I know we're not seeing it in like the hugest of ways, but there's definitely way less people that care now when some SJW screeches. Like a normie is just hearing screeching now instead of cancellation. It's just like, eh. So I think we're coming around. They've burnt too many bridges to survive, and they're realizing like the people with money are probably not so bad.
Hmm. What about in comics, though? You think they're still pretty entrenched there, or are they slowly
Well,
getting
yeah,
flushed
they're
out?
entrenched, but it's at a level that no one gives a shit about at this point. Like, who wants to work at Disney? Who wants to work at Marvel or DC? Like, those aren't even dream jobs anymore. It's just like it sounds more like a punishment. If you have kept up whatsoever in the last 7 or 8 years with what's going on at these places, there's no appeal left. Like when some SJW is like, oh, Ethan can't even work at DC if he wanted now. It's like, you think he would actually want to though? Like who wants to? Like that was a dream of mine when I was like a naive 18-year-old fresh out of high school and didn't understand the industry from that side. I just knew it as, this is what I want to do with myself. And this is the part of it I recognize, DC Marvel Image. That's not a dream for anybody anymore. And if it is, you just feel bad for them because you know they're going to be let down and disappointed.
But would working for them, though, even now, be kind of a shortcut to establishing your name and getting a reputation?
And
Is not
not if they choke out your creativity to a point that it just makes you look worse. There's not that many people coming out of there that actually that their solo projects entice me any more than anything else. I'd say like Nick Patera's Axe Wielder John. That's the only kind of like non R circle of the internet that I've backed. There's just nobody else I care about. They're all busy doing stupid, you know, uh, boohoo Ukraine comic projects over on Zoop. I don't know. There's just nothing out there that I really get enticed enough by to make that commitment. I'm sure someone else would disagree and be like, well, yeah, there's this person and that person. Like, I'm sorry. I just don't care anymore.
so you're saying that they get into like a creative crabs in a bucket, where like because they have to go into the SJW culture, even when they go indie with their projects, they still have to appeal to that segment and do projects that they would want to read.
I mean, yeah, but I don't see there's nobody that's really been pulled into the mainstream recently that's come back out of it to do something indie that really got my attention personally. Or was I mean what there's maybe like what Sean Gordon Murphy's thing
Hmm.
that was popular to some people for a little bit and he had some respect despite uh the people he's had to be mixed up with over the years. But I don't know. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying I can't think of anything right off the top of my head that would make me think uh, coming out of the industry is like a big deal. I think it just depends on people to people. I've been involved in the industry, so none of it's a big deal to me. So I may not be the best person to speak on it. If that makes sense. Like that might be something better suited for like somebody that's just a fan to speak on that doesn't have um experience of life affecting their opinion and is just looking at it purely from like a fan perspective.
But here, basically, from your experience, you feel like you can hit your creative stride, and
Oh,
there's
for
no
sure.
limitations there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't the only way I'd feel limited was if somehow Indiegogo had an issue and just started stripping campaigns for no reason or canceling them or shutting them down. Like something like that would suck, but outside of that, no, there's I don't even want to work for other people at this point if I don't have to, but I still do because I need a paycheck. So
So, where did you draw inspiration for a lot of the imagery you have in Bullet Maker? Because it's pretty different from Death, Death, Death. There, you're drawing like a lot of gods and like these huge creatures, and this is more like down to earth, Western, post-apocalyptic. How did that creative process come about, where you were immersing yourself in this world and coming up with the kind of imagery that you wanted to represent here?
um a lot of it was just in the early ons of it, Gat and Steve were they had a few book ideas they wanted to do and they were pitching different ones and this one they thought maybe I would just be able to excel at and wanted to know if I could draw horses, because I suppose that's something some people have a hard time with. Even though horse anatomy is kind of like a drawing 101 thing, like it's one of those early things you're taught, just because it applies so many places, and it's just a good thing to know how to do. So I drew up a few sketches, like, yeah, dude, I can draw roided out horses in my sleep. It's fun. And that basically got me the gig doing it. But we just would go through what their rough ideas were, kind of dictate the pacing of the panels somewhat, like how quickly we wanted things to move or slow down, and I would just do some basic sketches and send it over. I mean, stuff about this detailed, like nothing too crazy. And then just move ahead as long as they were cool with the angles and the stuff I was using. And it was a mishmash of like Gat had ideas, and I had some extra ideas to kind of back it up in terms of like the biblical stuff. So we just came together on it. They had a theme that I was able to work in, and it was a post-apocalyptic book, so I had a little room to get weird and get crazy with it and not have to be held back by just drawing like a muscly dude standing on buildings all the time, you know.
Did you take that roided out approach with a lot of the character designs?
Mostly the horses, but you occasionally will see some muscly people, like the dude you're showing on the screen now, Josephus. We intentionally kept him kind of like skinny and slim. Like part of Gat's character description was wanting him to look, and I know this sounds rude, but wanting him to look kind of white trash, like, you know, mullet, crazy-eyed, meth heady kind of look, even though he wasn't technically one. Just that kind of crazy, wild, psycho hillbilly look. So, you know, there were some general descriptions, and then I would just kind of amp them up just a little extra to drive the point home.
Hey, James Hayes, welcome to the chat. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, I noticed though there were still like these kind of figures. Um, you still had opportunities to do
Yeah.
setting for like the larger godlike mythical beings.
Yep, I did a handful of those in the book too. There were, oh crap, hang on. Sorry, I lost my camera tab there for a minute. I had to jump back over. Yeah, I've done. There were a lot of, not a lot of god characters, but one main one that I got to draw a good bit of outside of the parts with the devil at the end. And obviously, when you're drawing any kind of gods or characters like that that are on a deity level, you can definitely go super ripped with any of them, and it's fine.
Matt Kevlar LaRock admires the level of detail that you use in your drawings.
Thank you, sir. It's kind of my thing.
Mm. We also noticed. So, did you read the final product for Bullet Maker that was put to print?
No, I have not. I haven't got any copies yet, so I think Gat's got them down at his house. I just haven't went to get any because I haven't been down that way yet. But no, I have not. I remember a lot of the early script, but I know a good chunk of that changed um, between print and when I was working on the books. This was something I worked on like years ago at this point. But it's I know when Steve and Gat split ways, that a good chunk of like script, because Steve would kind of, that was like the creative process, like they would bash out the ideas and Steve would be the one typing and keeping track of it all. And I know they lost a certain amount of files with that disagreement, so Gat had to kind of work from memory and repiece things back together on his own. So yeah, I know more about what I remember from the early processes of working out and planning it out, but I don't know the exact how it all worded out, other than what I seen on the show the other night.
Did Steve ultimately like produce the final script for like Vestige 1 and 2, but he couldn't do that in this case?
1, yes. 2, I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you on that.
Okay, so this is like without the benefit of Steve's lens of
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
writing the.
The final bullet maker did not have Steve's lens on it. That was Gat and maybe Roe reading over it. I'm
Right.
just assuming.
Yeah. Would they like give him ideas and he would work with it and make a script out of it, or would they like type out a whole, you know, big wall of text, and basically he would filter it down? Because that's kind of what people are wondering here. It seems like there's a lot of detail that got inserted, and we were wondering if it's actually the panel descriptions that you were given for drawing the story, but it sounds like it wasn't. So
Well, for us when we were working on it, it was more like we would all three of us would get together. Um, Gat and Steve would have already bashed out a lot of it on their own, working together. So they would already kind of have like the general parts, and then that broken down into more detail, and then broken down more into actual pages and story and how much space they wanted to fill, etc. All that like tedious creative stuff. But ultimately, when we would meet up, I would go through with them what they wanted, kind of make some notes, and we would get a good idea kind of bashed out. I'd re-go through it with them, make sure we were on the same page, and then it was just kind of off to the races for me. So I didn't, every project's a little different how you work with other creatives. And on this one, we didn't do so much like, here's an exact script, punch this out. It was more like, here's what we want to happen. Here's the mood of it. Here's the kind of stuff the characters are going to be saying. They gave me the descriptions, and then I would kind of be like, well, here's what I'm thinking for this. Here's what I'm thinking for that. And we would meet in the middle somewhere. So it was a dual creative process. Everyone kind of had their say in it, but ultimately on all that final scripting and stuff, that was 100% Gat.
was it hard though to like lose Steve? Um, did that affect you at all in what you were doing at the time with the book? Did you have to redraw
Not
any pages?
not really, because I was pretty much nearly done with it by that point. That all happened towards the tail end, so it affected their relationship and them for sure. I mean, that's obvious. That ain't no secret. But
Right.
for me, it didn't really affect anything for me. My work was already all plotted out and just getting finished. So I didn't have any of those issues necessarily.
So I noticed, and if it's okay, there's a couple of previews that you sent me, and I was wondering if it's okay if we just talked about those.
Oh, sure.
Death,
Yeah.
Death, for example. So I noticed that you and Steve actually continued to work really closely, and he's the editor for both previews that you sent for both
Yeah.
projects.
Yeah, I have him do the editing on all our current books. So he's basically like, it's not so much he's the only editor out there, but he's the only editor out there that has um the knowledge and the eyeballs to go through a book in bare minimum, get you taken care of on like spelling and grammar. So, um, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of like little things he'll kind of throw at you too. It's just more like suggestions, and you take it for what it's worth. So, but yeah, I have Steve Dye look everything over and check it out because I know he's good for that. So,
Well, and it sounds like in the case of Vestige One, at least, he was a big part in making that story, that script, what it was, um, refining it down. Does he have as much input with these books, or is his role a little bit more pulled back and just at a refinement stage? Is he
yeah,
actually
yeah,
writing script as well?
no, he's basically just a spelling and grammar guy for us. And God bless him. It's not that he can't do other things. It's just like we know what we want. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, like, especially on Death, like, there's until I can have him go through the whole thing, in which I will get his takes on it. Um, in terms of like a finished project and story continuity and all that. Of course, I'll get his opinions on it and have him let me know if there's anything like standout that's an issue. But overall, I've got this thing pretty well figured out, and I've been doing this stuff for years now, so it's all kind of like muscle memory for me. But yeah, that's one where uh, it depending on what part of it could be an issue, it's not going to change. You know, there's some things where I'd be like, yeah, that's a little odd, I'll change it, but the bulk of the book is what it is. So unfortunately, an editor wouldn't even sway me on certain stuff.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see like just comparing to Bullet Maker, it's already the dialogue is much more um, reserved and um, doesn't occupy as much of the book as it did there. So
Well,
this
there's
isn't.
there's yeah, there's a time and a place for more dialogue where it's needed and where it's not, or more just words on the page. Um, I come from the old school of comic book training where one of the first things they kind of beat into you is a person should be able to follow generally what's happening without words. And I think you guys even noticed that on Bullet Maker. You said you could follow what was going on either way to some degree, you know. So, um, and that's just habitually how I work. I can't help it. And so sometimes I have to like force myself to even think of some things to put on the page, like for words. I'll be like, you drew everything so much, you're not leaving them a lot of room for explanation. But I try to be subtle with that too. I try to imply things through the dialogue and through the words. It's like you build the world from the artwork. Like you don't really have to explain the world in most things. You should be able to let that shine through in what you're actually putting on the page for art. And you can also let the characters like where they're led in a comic be what leads to the world building. So I try to keep that in mind with things too. Like it's stuff that you start to just do after a while without realizing it because you get so used to the grind and the habits of making comic books.
Yeah, I can see here also like your visual style is really flourishing. Uh, the designs that you've presented.
Yeah, well, it's I don't want to sound silly by saying something like it's a three-act comic book, but it's like it sort of is in a way of you're going through like three core stages in it that they're not just beginning, middle, and end. They're also um the literal order of the phases of the book where it's very biblical in the beginning and supernatural, and then it gets a little more like naturey and savage, still with a touch of the supernatural, so that one thing's kind of leading into the next in terms of themes and ideas, and then the last third of the book is really a war story where you still get little bits of that, but it progresses from supernatural to just nature to the mechanized future, you could say, even though it's not literally like super in the future. It's just that's the pace of things is it goes from each extreme, so you get an idea of kind of like in the regular world, how you might say, oh well, those people used to sacrifice people to the sun to appease a god, and then the next stage in history would be, well, they kind of still do that, but not to the same extremes. Like people are more less violent, but still have a belief, and then it gets to um, just the world's mechanized, and who knows what everyone's believing at this point. You know, it's kind of the real world stages that societies can go through, but it's amped up, I guess you could say.
Wilberforce points out, be very careful on picking the printer for the black and white edition. Lots of books don't quite nail it. Maybe ask Kyung Lee. Battlemaid and Knucklebomb always looked top notch.
Well, I'll be getting proofs and all that stuff, so there won't be anything coming out that's not up to par. You know, as long it's that's the thing. If people are going through the process enough and they're still getting bad results, there's got to be something else at hand. Like if you're getting proofs and you're getting all these things done to make sure the quality is up to par, um, After that, it's there's some other problem there, whether it's the printer or the person setting up the files. There's a lot of fine details to setting up print files that the average person doesn't even know about that can totally mess it up. You know, if your levels of black are too high, if your other color levels aren't set to certain points, and you just send over like a JPEG file with everything maxed out, it's going to come out wonky. It's not going to look the same. So, and that's something editors help with too. You know, I'll probably have Steve help me out with getting the files set up correctly and making sure all the levels are in place, because there's so many little things you don't expect till you're in the deep of it. You know, it's like anything else in life. It's nothing's as simple as it seems like it should be.
Case in point, here's this comment. While we're trying hard to get Joe to talk bad about the creative team, I specifically avoided questions about the split. I just wanted to understand the difference in the creative process with a change of creatives on the book. So wasn't trying to get anybody to trash anyone.
You know, they've been pretty public about it. It's not like it's some fucking secret at this point. You know, they don't get along. It is what it is. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So.
James Hayes says no crying, maybe, but Comicsgate has the mean ass chats, right? And I mean, we appreciate that because at least we're getting honest feedback, right?
Sure.
Worst thing is to be doing something wrong and not hear about it until it's too late. So, well, Red, your anti-bullet maker bias is showing. Well, I didn't read it, so sorry, I don't have a bias. Well Red just couldn't understand the motivation of Ryu after his father was blown up. Yeah, sometimes I think there are things being discussed in the chat that I'm not really tracking as part of the conversation. But with this preview, I am curious, though, what exactly are you setting up in these first 10 pages or 13 pages? How much of the story is being covered here?
This is literally like the first, what is it, 12 pages, I think. The first 12 pages from the book. This will be like the literal, when you get death in the mail, this is literally what you will see in the beginning. But as for what it is and what's happening, like, have you ever seen, I think Tarantino does this sometimes, like, you know how in movies sometimes they'll show you a moment from the end, it's not really the end, but it's close to, just to set you up kind of for what's to come, to add a little mystery, like, oh, what's that about? That's basically what the opener is you're getting a taste of the last third of the book on those first 2 pages. And it's just to set you up for well, how do we get to this point? How do we get to these big transformery looking robots with these crazy faces? And then it cuts over to where the story really begins. And it really begins in Atlantis during Noah's flood. It's already been flooding for days and days, a couple weeks actually, and the waters, you know, it's rising from the ocean, it's coming out of the ground as geysers, it's raining from overhead, so there's no end in sight. Everyone's pretty much fleed, and I insinuate that, you know, they either died at sea or they've just been drowned to some degree. And there are these last few, you know, military personnel and some of their servants that are left at the city as you know, just as the military guys holding their post decide to finally flee and make the best of it and see what happens. And ultimately, they are killed. They're not allowed to live. And they're rebirthed. God has some mercy. He has some sympathy on them, despite the fact that they're genetic abominations created by fallen angels. And, well, they're not fallen yet because this is the flood, but they're very close to that point.
The flood of heaven, is that why they're angels that are eventually fallen in a flood?
Well, what happens is when God's cleansing the earth, ultimately the angels that procreated with females, and this is just biblical history. I don't put all this in the book. they part of their punishment is being kicked out of heaven. So when they're kicked out, those angels are, and they're not even all angels. Some of them are different varieties of heavenly creature that we just call angels. Angels are basically like one specific type of heavenly creature. All besides the point. They get booted and they're stuck on Earth. And biblically, they have high resentment for not being able to go home essentially any longer, not being able to fly and go back and forth. So, anyways, they're the ones that ultimately God wanted the flood because they had corrupted so many things. They had mated with earth women and created, just ferocious, disgusting giants that were all over the place, um, which was still a problem even after the flood. There's a Bible reference to them corrupting things all the way down to the seed of them, almost like it's saying to the genetic level of plants, animals, humans. Um, you get references to the lion like men, and you get biblical references to things we think of as more like Greek and Roman type things, like these half animal, half human hybrids and things like that. So that was the point of the flood, is to wash out all the genetic abominations on the planet at the time that were not the things God created. So that's essentially all it is. I don't go too far in on the flood because it's just like a setup point in the story to kick things off. But it eventually goes over to the planet that where they're rebirthed at. These Atlanteans that are killed here soon. But yeah, once it takes off there, that's pretty much where most of the story happens. The Earth flood is basically just a setup point in the first bit of the book.
It transfers them to this other planet where they're reincarnated, essentially.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like they can't stay on Earth. Earth is for Noah and his kin because they were deemed by God the only non-corrupted humans in terms of like down to a genetic level. So they're allowed to survive to replenish. But nobody else was. And it was very intentional, and it was just what the Lord wanted. He didn't want these things around. They caused trouble, and these Atlanteans are abominations, but it's no fault of their own, if that makes sense. It's like they had no choice in the matter. They
Right.
weren't they're helpless to their circumstance. So in their cries, the Lord has a little mercy. And it's like, you can't stay here, but I'll put you someplace else where you can be. So he sends them to this moon outside of Saturn, which is like, in my head, I just kind of made this up. Biblically, there's references to like Behemoth and Leviathan. It says something about Behemoth being so big and consuming that God moved him. It doesn't say killed him. It doesn't say he exactly what he did. It just says he moved him. So in my head, I thought it'd be cool if there was like a whole nother kind of Earth-like planet, but with oversized everything. And that's where creatures like the dinosaurs, behemoth, any big wild thing you can think of. I just make up creatures for this planet, where God sent them, and that's where these Atlanteans are rebirthed at. And it's their one chance because they shouldn't be alive anyways. They shouldn't have existed in the first place, and they've really got no business uh, being alive. So the Lord still has a tiny bit of mercy, and they're going to get sent to this rough place, and they got to figure out how to make it.
There was a question in the chat. Should be sample pages on the Indiegogo page. Have you considered offering the PDF on the Indiegogo for free?
For the Ash,
for the preview that we're looking
I
at
will
right now.
eventually. Yeah, I wanna get through Houston first, and after I get through Houston and get some of them out there, then I'll eventually throw that up for everybody else too.
Do you have these pages, any of these pages colored? James Hayes would really be interested in seeing the colored versions.
Yeah, if you look at my Twitter, you'll see a good chunk of them colored. I haven't showed off every one of them colored, but yeah, you can see the first at least 3 to 5, maybe. I don't know. I'll just tell you this: I've already put out at least 30 pages to the public, so there's no shortage of pages from this book to look at.
Yeah, I think James is on the fence of whether or not he wants to back the black and white or the colored. I told him to just get both. I mean, you're going to want to.
Both is the best option because they're different. But if you really want to know, yeah, just skim my Twitter, like skim the media section. You'll see plenty of like side by sides of color versions of the same page with black and whites and stuff like that. And I'll say this: I wash out a lot of line art with color. Yeah, as you can see there. So some pages still retain a lot of the line art. Some of them don't retain quite as much because the each thing is like a frame for the next thing. So, once I get done doing line work, that's now just a frame for what I do with color. So that's kind of the difference in them. I make each step as refined as it can be, and then I use that as a frame for the next step.
Yeah, I feel like you have two talents here. One is of course the line art, the pencils that you do, and the other is the colors. And it's like, which one do you want to appreciate? Well, you'd like to appreciate both, but you just can't at the same time.
Well, they're different. They set different moods. If you go with the black and white, it's going to feel kind of like a creepy comic all the way through, exempting a handful of things that I intentionally pretty up, and I don't hatch and do all that kind of stuff nearly as much. But that's not that's not much of the book, to be honest. So if you want it to feel creepier and a little darker, yeah, the black and white's the way to go. If you want a little energy that color brings and to get an idea of where, like how my brain sees some of this stuff rendered out, then the color's the way to go. It just depends on what kind of mood you want to have when you're reading it.
Yeah, for me, it was necessary to get both. I mean, both are just incredible. So,
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
um,
And I really like doing color too. Like that's the thing. Even though it's a pain in the butt to do all this stuff, like um, there's a when you finish drawing a page, there's a certain level of satisfaction, and then when it's all colored and it looks the way you want, that's like another level of satisfaction that you don't get from just inking and drawing.
Wilberforce is asking also, can you tell us what the anime Matsuri Ashcan will be if you reach the goal?
It's literally what he's looking at on screen when you were showing it earlier, the PDF file. Hang on a sec. I've got. It's not perfect, but I have a proof copy that's close enough.
Cool.
So it's just a black and white version. It's essentially what the black and white book would look like.
This is the 13 pages we were just looking at, essentially, in print.
The only thing is with this one, I had to have the printer fix it because I don't know how she realized this wasn't supposed to take up 2 pages. It's like, that's how I sized it, but she's a nice lady. She fixed it for me. I'm not going to jump her case. She's very patient with me. So it's just a local printer I have through these.
Yeah, it's nice.
But yeah, this is essentially what you'll get.
Cool. Nice to see it in physical.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was fun too because like sometimes people be like, well, what if you shrink it down too much? It'll be hard to see, or what if you do that? It'll be hard to see. It's like it's really not. If anything, when you shrink things down, they always get tighter. It's going up. It's the issue, not going down. So I was pretty happy with it. It's all super clear. I mean, I don't know if that translates to the internet, but if you were seeing it with your own eyes right here with me, you'd see that it's perfectly minty clear. There's no smudges. There's no messed up lines or nothing. Like for what essentially amounts to an inexpensive mini comic with the homemade appeal. Because that's part of the charm of an ash can. Like some people go crazy with their ash cans, get them colored in fancy paper. I'm like, that's fine, but you're defeating the point of an ash can. It's supposed to have that homemade charm of I did this on my own printer and look how cool it still came out. So
right.
I was very happy with it. I had no no qualms at all. I thought it looked way better than I even expected. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you drawing death right now? Those pages in the back there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Which page are you up to, if you don't mind me asking? How far along it
Well,
is?
I'm floating between like 227 and 232. So what I'll do is I'll get like 5 or 6 pages going at once because I run into awkward points or I'll get frustrated, and rather than like sit there and like waste time fighting with something that's not going my way, I'll just move on and keep working and then kind of come back to it with a fresh set of eyes. So I'm floating right between there. So I've still got like an absolute mountain of effing work to do, but it's moving along good. Once Houston's over, I'll have, because I've fulfilled most of my like uh paid gigs and commissions and all that kind of stuff I still have to do. Because I've gotten through the bulk of that recently, it's kind of refreed me up to just start crushing some more pages here. So I'll be
Sorry, you.
bashing right through these. Like here you can see, like this one I had like 2 panels that were just bugging me forever, and I finally pulled this page back out the other night and just like wrapped it up, finished it. This one I drew forever ago, and I still have just this little bit of stuff to fill in down here, but it was giving me hell, so I was like, gonna walk away from it a little bit, work on something else, and then I'll come back and finish this panel. So there's just, it just depends. You know, I get a little all over the place with it sometimes, but you have to, you can't waste time. And sometimes trying too hard on a panel is a waste of time. Or if you just walk away from it for a day or two and then come back to it, it can actually surprisingly go really well. It's like, okay, now I see what the problem was. I don't know how I didn't see that the first time, but just just part of the creative process, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you're stumped on a problem, it's always good to like give your brain a little refresher and come back to it.
Yeah.
Sorry, you popped up a couple of ash cans there, and I didn't get a chance to ask because one I've seen. It's the other book that you have a preview for, Swarm.
Yeah.
But then the other one I haven't seen. Yeah, there's
Well,
that.
this is our Mothman book. We already put this out like, I don't know, a year or two ago or something.
Okay.
So this is just basically just a preview for preview's sake, just to have just to show off some of our other stuff at the convention. But this is the book Shane did, my business partner, that he did last year, the year before. I think the year before, I believe. There's a picture, a Halloween picture I did for back when it came out. We'll have prints of those as well. But yeah, so we figured we might as well just get some of these made up. It's already finished product, so all I had to do was turn the files to grayscale and send it over. It was probably the easiest one to get done because I didn't have to do a bunch of work to it. But
And this
Swarm,
is, yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, this is Swarm. So tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about it.
This is going to be our hero book that we got coming up here a little later this year. Probably, let me think for a minute. I'm going to say maybe around September. We're going to try to launch it close to the Cincinnati Comic Expo. But we've got some really good artists that are going to be doing covers. We'll probably have like a couple covers for this one because it's a superhero book. But it's like it's this dude that was like a child experiment that got these like bee powers from being crossbred genetically with bugs. It's kind of like a Ninja Turtles type feel where it's these weird bug or animal kind of crossbreed things. But yeah, so he becomes this fun young superhero. We've got a variety of people kind of working on the interiors, like I do all the final run overs to make sure it all looks good. So you will see a touch of my style put on it. But yeah, it's just a fun adventure superhero book. Like that's the point of what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to feel reminiscent of good times hero books of back in the day in the 70s and 80s, but up to date. And this will be color on the final one, but the ash can, because our colorist is literally coloring it now. So we just went with the grayscale and black and white pages for now.
Is it your first time doing a superhero book like this?
No, I've done tons of superhero books in the past. It's the first one for our company, but no, for me personally, not at all. I did even here in CG, I did Nightwalker for Malin, which is basically like his Batman, I guess you could say.
That was one of the Graveyard Shift supplementals?
Yep.
Right. Okay. Did you draw and write that, or?
No, I just drew it. I had nothing to do with the writing.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember that specific book.
I think Rob Arnold did the final writing on it, and I think Polton did like the basic, did like here's the rough idea, and then I think Rob Arnold refined it all. And John has his hands on everything too, so there's always going to be a touch of John, a touch of mostly Rob, and then a little bit of Mark Polton. So you'll get that with any Graveyard Shift book, no matter who the core writer or whatever is on it. Even on artwork, John has his input. So
How was that collaborative experience working with them?
yeah, it was hit and miss at times, but it wasn't terrible.
Did you feel?
It's just go ahead.
No, go. Please finish your thought.
I was just gonna say it's every creative. I don't want to say partnership because that's not right, but every time you're working with different teams, it's different from people to people for how they work and what they want, what they expect. And I think once we got it narrowed down to just me being firm about, look, I just need the final word to come from John. I need one person's final word so that I'm not going back and doing things that maybe aren't necessary or not to his liking. So when there's three or four people all trying to dictate things at once, sometimes you just got to let them know, like, I just need to hear it from one guy, just so I know for fact. And once we got that kind of squared away, because that was early on in the process, it was fine, and we bashed through it. But I also like came into that project with the least um, amount of time to get things done, and my wife was on the verge of having a baby at the same time and all that, so it was a weird period. I think I was just stressed in general, so it wasn't 100% like everybody else, but I had my moments too. So
Does
but
that
John's
normally
cool, you know.
does that normally happen though in these creative team processes? There's too many cooks in the kitchen, and um, might maybe even just better to work one on one with somebody rather than to work with a really big group of people.
I mean, it depends. Like I said, it's different every single book. I think it's best to have whoever's going to have the final word anyways, to just go ahead and have it. It avoids time being wasted on changes and adjustments down the road. But generally, I really only deal with one person. I rarely deal with a whole lot of people at once. So at max two is what I'm used to, which is fine because that's usually just people trying to make sure bases are covered with everybody.
Do you
But
often
yeah,
feel do you often feel like they're just kind of giving you a task list and you're just wanting them to get the tasks right, or are you also um, suggesting and maybe steering, guiding a little bit of where the project is going with some of the feedback that you give?
um,
Does it go both ways, or is it usually just a
yeah,
one-way street?
yeah. I mean, it can go both ways. It's I don't know. What's the question again? So now I feel like I lost my own thoughts.
I'm just wondering, like when you're in those creative sessions, and they hire you and they want you to work on a book for them. Is
Sure.
it, hey Joe, do A, B, and C, or is it, Joe, we want to do A, B, and C. What do you think? And then you suggest D. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Those kind of things can happen. I think it's dependent uh, on what the part of the book is. Like every once in a while, you may have someone that's they've got everything nailed out, but there's still like one or two pages or something where they're like, I'm not sure if we should approach it this way, or this way. And you give your input and you see what happens. They may do something completely different from any of the options that were originally presented. So, but it's different for it. Some people like creative input in a collaborative way. Some have zero interest in it, and it's fine both ways. Whoever's paying the tab is has no obligation to listen to anybody else. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's the way I look at it. Whatever they ask of me, if they're the one paying me, that's what I'm gonna do art wise for them. So if I present one thing and I say I think it'd be really sweet to do it this way, and they say no, do it this way, I'm gonna say all right, that's fine. You know, I'm not there to lobby whoever's paying for it. If they want it their way or the highway, that's perfectly acceptable.
And you're able to accommodate like in either working situation.
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, Bullet Maker, a huge, a good portion of that's me in terms of um, the actual angles of how it was drawn, the character designs. I think I still own like a certain percentage in it in terms of character design and stuff, but that's irrelevant. It doesn't really matter. Um, but yeah, it's with GAT, I had a lot of wiggle room for what I was doing. Like basically, as long as I sent pages over and they were like, "These look sweet," that was good enough. But like with John, we probably did 3 rounds of refinement on the thumbnails before it was down to like what he wanted and the angles and the pace. So that stuff was a little different. He basically was like, "Here's the script. What would you do?" And I sent him the thumbnails of what I had in mind or how my brain saw it. And then he went through and kind of tweaked how he saw it working. And it was always somewhere in the middle. It was always kind of half his layouts and half mine, you could say. But Bullet Maker was mostly mine in terms of layout, but it doesn't mean they didn't have an idea of what was going on the page. I may have just dictated like size of panel or uh, the angles and the stuff and the way it would make your eye move or read. Things that are still typical artsy things you should just be able to do either way.
I'm guessing like with probably newer creators or less experienced creators, you're probably offering a lot more input generally. They don't come in just acting like they know everything, or is that not necessarily true?
It depends. You feel people out. I know I'm saying it depends a lot, but it really does.
Mm.
You got to feel out who you're dealing with, what their lines are. You can kind of figure out where suggestions would be welcome and where they wouldn't, and you figure out the type of person they are. Like there's some people I've worked with where I'm not gonna give them any ideas. They just need to tell me what they want. Because that's how it's going to go anyways. So I'll just beat them to the punch and be like, no, tell me specifically what you want, because I'm not doing work twice. And then there's other people where they're like, just do whatever you want. I'm sure it'll be good. Like Joe Sontag had me do like a Reaper Destroyer commission, and I was like, all right, man. Well, what do you want? You got anything special in mind, or is there like scenery or backgrounds or poses or something you really want for this? And he just said, no, just do whatever you want, man. Just interpret it your own way. And it was off to the races. I had a good time doing it because of that.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like you have to kind of it's a almost like a personal process in these collaborations. You have to kind of know what kind of people you're working with and what their ticks are and what their
Yeah,
reactions are going to be.
100%, man. Yeah, it's still very much a people a like you got to be able to speak to other people and communicate at least at a medium level, because
Mm.
if you can't communicate with other people very well, um, you're probably going to have more issues in the long run trying to make comics if you're not going to just solely do your own book, because everyone is different, and if you can't communicate with multiple people in different ways, it can be difficult. I
Hmm.
was lucky, man. Like I know people wouldn't say this is lucky, but I was raised a Jehovah Witness for part of the younger part of my life. So I was going door to door, like, proselytizing the people from the time I was a little boy. So I've got almost zero shame about speaking to strangers, um, public speaking, anything like that, because it's just been second nature for so much of my life when I was a young fella. So even though I didn't get, a birthday party till I was like 19, and I didn't get a Christmas till I was like 19 or 20, I still uh, I still gained a lot of skills from it that have aided me as an adult.
Do you still believe in proselytizing, or have you kind of left a bit of that kind of in your childhood already?
Uh, Not from a Jehovah Witness perspective, but if someone's interested, I'll definitely tell them what I think to be true.
I
But
imagine.
it's just like if you know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses, um, and obviously it's like any other religion, they're not all good, they're not all bad. Uh, their their take on biblical things and Christianity is tough to if you really believe in the Bible, there's going to be things that are going to come up that are going to be tough to wrestle with. Like they don't even believe Jesus was put on a cross, despite the fact that it says he was crucified. They think he was just put on a stake. So there's little things like that that are part of the overall um, dogma of things. And a Catholic or a Baptist or a Protestant, something like that, Luther, basically every other type of Christianity would be like, I can't get past that. That's just false according to everything we know about Scripture. And it wasn't just him crucified; there were two other dudes beside him. It's. I wouldn't go out preaching about the gospel of what Jehovah's Witnesses teach because there's too many things that I can't align with. But
So,
they taught me a lot of good skills growing up, and I'll never take that away from them.
so you're not a Jehovah's Witness any longer. Am
No,
I?
no,
Okay.
no. My mom still is, but she's about the most of it. Like no, it's not like a thing that most of my family participated in. She was like the outlier. But no, I went like most people. I stayed as far away from religious stuff as I could for in like my early 20s and my late teens, and then somewhere around my late 20s, um, I came back around to a lot of it and quit being an uptight young person that just had a point of view that was being affected by a life experience that wasn't fair. So now I
Mm.
just consider myself just a regular Christian.
Are you part of like a an organized religion, or are mostly agnostic?
No, I mean I'm just regular Christian. Nothing nothing to really specify past that. I believe in the King James Bible and a lot of the outside text that didn't make it in just due to one reason or another, and that's that. There's really not a lot else to describe it. I
Mm.
don't participate with like a specific church or anything. I'll go to some of the Christian churches around here for like holiday functions and different things like that for family members. Um, I'd say Baptist are probably the closest to what I could relate to. But a lot of my church is YouTube. I listen to a lot of religious content on there from all across the board, because there's a lot to gain and learn from religions of current and past and present and all that. And it also inspires my work, and it's got a lot of historical value that's very interesting to me. So,
I'm guessing it comes up a lot though in these creative collaborations where things do get kind of personal and you start talking about your beliefs and how you view the world.
it does sometimes. I'll tell you, it's here's how like a lot of things have worked. A lot of people have kind of gotten the feeling that like I interject these things into everything I work on, and what they don't know is some people came to me because of these things. I didn't I didn't add them to the project. like Bullet Maker, for example, part of the appeal of working with me was I had a broad knowledge of Bible lore and things related to that. And that was appealing to GAT because they were doing a book that was loosely based in the apocalypse, or after the apocalypse, I guess you could say. So, and there were religious or biblical, not religious, but biblical themes and tones. So, um, it just made me an ideal candidate because that's already stuff I'm into. It's like saying, I want to do a book that's hyper detailed. I'll go get Joe Ball. It wasn't so much. I came to someone else and said, "Let me draw you a hyper detailed book." So that's really how that's came along usually. Even Yellow Flash with the book I'm doing for him, when he came to me, it's a story with Christian and religious tones in it. Even though he's not a Christian, he's atheist to the max. So it's just when people want those themes in a story, they're drawn to me because they know I already do those themes. I already have an appreciation for it, and it's something I'm knowledgeable about. So I can bring, things to the table that maybe they weren't familiar with or didn't know about. And it's because just Bible and Bible lore has a wealth of cool things to work from.
Right. So Yellow Flash, he's also a new creator, and I guess he was hoping that you could fill in a part of that theological aspect of the story that he's working on.
Yeah. Yeah, to
So,
be there as part of not just an artist, but as someone that's familiar with the territory of what we're working in.
so is it similar to Bullet Maker, where it's kind of like a co-collaboration and you own a percentage of that project as well?
Well, I mean, I won't own anything from it. I'm just a hired hand, but it's definitely, yeah, it's more collaboration. I can definitely go to Flash or bash things out with him the same way as I would with Gat or anyone that's a little more looser around the edges about what we're doing. Um, uh, Flash is open to basically here's kind of like a Flash mindset or idea. He will have a clear vision of what he wants to happen, but not necessarily in a panel to panel format. So that's obviously where I'm going to come into play, is to take his general idea and lay it out in a way where he can say, yes, that's what I see in my head. So, and maybe then some, because I always try to go the extra mile with everybody's work. I don't take any gig lightly. So um, if there's anything I can bring to something to make it even more exciting, I do my best to. And he's always appreciative of that.
I guess since you mentioned Geth, maybe just to wrap up the Bullet Maker discussion, is Bullet Maker 2 in the works at all as Wilberforce?
I believe so. I mean, I'm not doing it, but I feel like I heard something about it being in the works. So don't quote me on it, but I'll say like I'm 80% sure it's being worked on right now by somebody.
You would be informed though, as like co-owner, wouldn't you?
Just on design factor. They don't really have to inform me. It's just, if anything, like let's say there's some other media that's done with it, whether it be an animation or a movie or a novel, just anything else where my design work's being used, then yeah, I'm entitled to a certain percentage based off that. But outside of that, that's those are all like big what ifs in terms of if it would pay off for me. So, but in terms of like doing another book, I'm not super concerned about that. Like that's not, the designs and stuff I did for that. It's not like I'm super attached to. There'd have to be like serious money involved for me to really care.
Right. So, what kind of story is Flash writing? If it's also has a lot of these religious themes injected into it, is it a superhero story? Is it post-apocalyptic?
Without giving too much away, it will be something that rides the line of post-apocalyptic. Not quite, but within like that aesthetic, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
crumbled buildings, dystopic places. Even though not every inch of it's like that, you're gonna see that kind of imagery. Um, it's gonna definitely be, a lot more manga styled in terms of it's gonna intentionally look like a Japanese style applied to an American format. Sort of like what Tim Lim and guys like that do. How it's it's manga, but it's not printed like manga. It's not grayscale like manga. It's just a style and an aesthetic. So that's where that's gonna be. But it's kind of like a redemption story for a character that feels lost and without God, despite being um, a part a part of religion where he takes that really seriously. So it's kind of a redemption story in that sense. But it'll be full of lots of shoot 'em up action and crazy demons and monsters and yeah, I don't want to say too much else outside of that. But it'll be fun. It'll be interesting. I'm sure he'll start letting me show some more stuff here soon, so I can let people see it. But it's definitely got a little bit of Akira Toriyama, a little bit of I can't remember his name now, but the dude that did a lot of the Castlevania art and Final Fantasy art that you'd see in the booklets and stuff. Very like high detailed, really manga where characters' heads are kind of small, their bodies are oversized, but the fabric on their clothes just seems to flow for miles, and uh, their hair might be ultra detailed, like that kind of stuff. So it'll be a melding of a few different Japanese styles into one.
I want to say the guy who did Castlevania. Uh, I don't remember it being manga, but maybe that was one of the games from that series.
Well, he didn't paint the covers. It's the guy that did like the design work for like he did some Castlevania art for like wall scrolls and posters and stuff. He wasn't like the early artist for it. He's known for, like, have you ever seen Vampire Hunter D, the
Right.
second movie? He
Okay.
did the design work for all that in the second movie, and I believe he also did all the novel covers, which was kind of what he was originally known for. And the novel covers, even though you can kind of tell the phases of him going from like getting better as time went on, it's all still really good. And I suggest that to anyone. If you're ever bored and you just want to look at some just beautiful artwork that is completely all its own, like nobody can really claim to have came before it that have achieved similar things, go look at those Vampire Hunter D novel covers and the Final Fantasy design work. Same guy did the Metal Gear Solid like pamphlet work that you would see in like the little book that came with the game and stuff. He's an excellent artist.
Is it Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I've got a few here I can show quickly. Um, just give people kind of a sense. So Fowler says his name is Amano.
Oh, thank you, Fowler.
Yeah. I didn't think it was the same guy that you work with, Fowler, because I didn't think that artist was manga style, but yeah. So kind of like this, kind of like a dark manga.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. The tone will be similar to what you're seeing there.
Yeah. And this is you drawing it as well, I guess, in this style. And also something new for you, or something you've done before.
New for me in the sense of no one's really asked me to do it on like a large scale. I've done plenty of it just for fun or commissions or on my own time, but it'll definitely it'll be new in the sense of I've never done a full book this way.
Cool.
But it's something I will take advantage of more in the future because one of my most popular death images was a image I did intentionally to be like an Akira Toriyama style. So it was like, what if Toriyama drew this book? What would it look like? Even though it wasn't quite 100% on the money, in terms of the mech. Like the character designs were pretty right on, and it was such a popular image. I'm like, I'm gonna have to do a full book this way at some point because way too many people like it for me to not take advantage of that, and it's just fun for me.
Is it just you and Yellow Flash working together, or are there other people involved too?
There will be a colorist.
Okay.
Outside of that, I couldn't tell you. That's all I know of.
And so, what kind of material has Flash given you to work with? Does he give you like an outline or a full script? Like how does that process go?
A little mishmash of both. Sometimes it'll just be a general idea or an outline. Sometimes it'll be more specific and scripted out. Um, we're getting closer to getting into the nitty gritty of it here soon. So um, I'll definitely be working off of more refined content here in the near future.
Is he basing it on his Yellow Flash character, or is it something totally original?
No, yeah, it's totally different.
Okay.
Yep, it's completely its own. No, no relevance to anything else that's out there.
Is it going to be something large size? Like is it 40 pages, 96 pages? What's he targeting?
I think it'll be in the 48 realm. I don't know exactly where he wants to cut off at. That'll probably just depend on things he wants to do with the story or changes or adjustments along the way, because that stuff happens all the way down to the last minute in some cases. And I'm not speaking on Flash specifically. I just mean in general. No matter what you work on, you're gonna have some of that kind of stuff come up. People change their minds too. Sometimes you just get a better idea for something. Artists generally don't care as long as they're being paid for their labor.
Right. Yeah, and you've been doing this long enough, I guess. You don't have to worry about people not paying you. Like you pretty much, how to do professional arrangements. You have contracts. You budget your time and your contributions accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, not to say there isn't still a chance things can come up every once in a while, but these days it's pretty rare. You do what you have to do. If it's someone I don't know well or I've never worked with, obviously I'm going to be a little more picky about deposits or things like that. But if it's somebody I know good enough, I just get to work. They know to pay me. I don't think I've ever had anybody in CG really have that be a problem. You'll actually find that to be a bigger problem in the mainstream than you ever will in CG.
They don't like to pay for the work that they commission.
Sometimes they just they'll make up excuses to weasel their way out of it. And the sad part is, it's people that pay on the lowest scale that do that shit. So it's like, dude, you couldn't cough up $20 a page for this guy. That's all you owed him was like $600 or $700 for a full book. Just pay the person.
Wow.
So, there's that kind of stuff happens. I don't want to say all the time, but it happens enough.
Yeah, I mean, who's working for $20 a page? That's a really low rate.
I don't know. Guys that do shitty interiors for Xenoscope or Boom or places like that.
Okay.
That's interesting. You can tell it's not like a secret. It's pretty common knowledge in the industry. I mean, there's a reason Xenoscope has like these insane, awesomely drawn like J. Scott Campbell covers or David Finch covers with these super high-end colorists on it. And then you open the book up and 9 times out of 10 it's just lackluster garbage. So it's the money is all sinking to the guy that's still in the front, which is fine. Those dudes aren't cheap, but nor should they be. But you gotta bring a little something to the table with those interiors. It's just unacceptable. So it's unacceptable to be taking advantage of young noobs that you can get to do work for next to nothing because they're so desperate to get their foot in the door.
So do you have a lot of people reaching out to you wanting to work with you in CG? Sounds like you've worked
Yeah.
with a lot of people already and a lot of big names.
I mean, it goes in waves. There could be like a few months where I don't really hear from much of anybody. And then there could be a month where, like, I swear to God, I get swarmed by everybody in creation. So, it has its ebbs and flows. Um, a lot of times it's when people are ramping up for something, or they've got an idea, they just want to get into production early, because you know how it is these days. A lot more people, myself included, are trying to get books moving as early as possible and in production if you can afford it, so that you can be as close to print ready as possible. Because we just want to get books in people's hands as quickly as possible without hurting quality. So I think that's kind of a common theme around these parts right now. Um, but yeah, I turn down more work than I take, and it's nothing personal. It's just because what some people want, I cannot accommodate them for right now. It's like too much work. So I'll do my best to suggest other people I know, other quality artists I know, or guys that might be good fits, if not a better fit than what I would be. So, because it's not a brag, it's just one of those things where it's like I appreciate the offer because I've got to make money, but I've also committed to too many other people already. Like I can't take on any more big projects right now. I can only take on little 8 to 10 page projects max. And even some of those I've had to get restrictive about and kind of cut off. Um, but I mostly just do a lot of covers. I get heaps of covers and splash pages for prints or for posters or for trading cards. Like that kind of stuff's easy for me to bash out. So I take a bunch of that work intentionally just because I can do it quick and make a little money.
Do you usually keep the originals and sell them, or are you expected to give those up to the person who commissioned the work?
Generally, it's not an issue. You keep it and sell it, or the person I'll give, like the person that commissioned me to do it in the first place, like first dibs. I think that's just like good courtesy to make sure they've got first shot at it. But it just depends on who I'm dealing with. If it's a friend, like a creator friend, or if it's someone I know really needs like the campaign bump, I just give it to them. But if it's somebody where um, I don't think that's a necessity for them, or I just don't know them that well, then they got to pay up for it. 'Cause anybody else, 90% of the time, would have to pay up. But I'm not going to lie, I make special exclusions for certain people, and that's because I know them. And you know how it is.
Yeah.
Just dislike everybody till I know you. Once I get to know you, I don't dislike you anymore.
Right. Well, I'm wondering also, like in this sector of comics, because you said you worked in the mainstream and you're working here. Are people more generally friendlier and on their best behavior because it's a smaller community and everybody kind of talks and knows everybody else? Or do you still get like, um, occasional bumps in the road with interactions with people and people you deal with?
Hmm. I don't know. I think it's tough because it's like saying you go to your day job and pretending like you don't get frustrated with your fellow coworkers every once in a while, even if you don't dislike them. It's just people are going to bump heads every once in a blue moon. It's kind of the same thing. It's there's obviously there's always going to be um, a certain amount of ego and people that think they're right about this or right about that, and any industry on planet Earth, uh, and comic books isn't immune to that. But I think in CG at least, everyone's kind of got the "don't bother me and I won't bother you" attitude. I can't speak for everybody because I don't know everybody, but most of the guys I do know, it's pretty simple.
Is it easy to like reach out to people and ask for a hand here or there or some advice, or is everybody kind of siloed and just working on their own thing and doesn't want to be disturbed because they're too busy?
I'd say it goes both ways. It depends. You know, if you're already like a creator buddy with them, sure, that's fine. They're gonna talk to you or let you know or do their best to help. If you're new to it and you approach them politely, yeah, they'll probably. I would say most guys will probably do their best to give you a fair answer. Um, I personally, even if it's something I don't know or I don't really have room to speak to, once again, I'll try to suggest them to someone that does, and I'll check with that person and be like, hey, you know, this dude I met has some questions. Do you mind kind of trying to at least give him some ballpark ideas of what to do? And most people are pretty friendly about it. You know, there's you'll occasionally run into someone that feels like they got to guard their trade secrets, even though they're not trade secrets or shit we already all know. But it's pretty rare. Most people are pretty willing to uh, at least be verbally helpful, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Is that the same in your experience in the mainstream too? Like people were typically
Most of what I did was like I worked for guys that did mainstream work, but then tried to do their own indie projects. So that's the realm where I was getting picked up for a lot more stuff. So it was working with some mainstream guys, but it was still like I guess you could say like right outside of it. But you know, you still got exposed to kind of all the same stuff. Um, some of them were okay and were friendly, but in those days, pre CG, so you didn't really have any personal relationships with those people. They were just names or faces, guys who knew what, you know, gig they did or what book they worked on. So, I mean, I think some of them probably would have been nice enough to give advice or go deeper on things, but overall, I never really personally felt the need to ask them things like that. So I may not be the best person to answer that. That might be something where you'd have to actually have someone that went through that experience to give you a better idea because I was just a hired hand most of the time. It was what do you want, what do you need, and I turned in my work, got my money, and that was that. Like there's tons of gigs I did where I don't even know if it saw the light of day. Once I was finished with it, I was moving on to the next thing. I was too busy to care about what happened to it after I did my part. And I'm still very much like that because I don't really have time to think ahead
but
on what other people are doing.
but it sounds like it is possible though to build those personal relationships here at least. People are more
It
open to
is,
that.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's like anything else. There's always going to be some people like you don't want to get mixed up with just because maybe you bumped heads with them at some point, but it doesn't mean other people don't do fine with them.
Right.
You know, it's everyone's experiences can be different with different people for different reasons. So I don't want to sound like uh, my experience is representative of everyone else's with any individual person. Um, you know, I like David Finch was a guy that was a pro that was always really cool with me. Uh, from around like 2014 or 13, you know, I had met him and he was very helpful with trying to give me some guidance in terms of the artwork. And I don't know other, you know, Silvestri has some rough stories about him. But the catch is it's not really fair because these are stories of a 20-year-old man. The guy I met was a 40-something-year-old man. You know, those are two different people. Those are not going to be the same guy. So it's hard to say with things like that. You can meet some people that finally grew up in life and have a great experience, but if you might have met them when they were if people would have met me when I was 20, they wouldn't have liked me.
Well, you were
So
proselytizing when you were 20, right?
no, I was in the degenerate 20s. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, I was just living life.
Yeah. They might have liked you
But
more than your proselytizing years. So,
yeah. Well, these days I'm like, yeah, I joke about like drugs and cigarettes and guns and all that stuff because I do still have a smoking problem and I chain smoke when I work pretty bad. And I do have guns and I love guns and all that kind of stuff. But I'm really probably more basic than most people would imagine. Like I'm extremely old fashioned and boring. So uh, I'm not really the most like day to day exciting guy, but I'm also older now. I've got multiple children, um, and I'm drawing 24/7 and trying to finish stuff just constantly. So I'm fine with that. I don't feel the need to ever go back to the 20s.
Yeah, I think most of us feel that way. So it's just easier to get along with people,
Yeah,
right?
well, there's
Why?
something to life experience. It's good for people. It's why I know when we're young, it's hard to understand why people like wisecrack at our expense so much with things that are over our head. But it's like you just don't know things till you know things. You don't. There's certain things in life you can't know till you experience it firsthand. And the older you get, the more that reality is set in, and there's nothing wrong with it. So.
But even though you want to get along, it sounds like you still kept some of your rebelliousness. Like you didn't conform into an industry job where maybe the pay is more steady. You still would rather do things independently so that you can still keep your morals and convictions.
Yeah, well, too, like I know this might sound silly to some people, but I look backwards and I'm glad it where I'm like at my age now. And I came to this conclusion before I even started that. It was really once I was working and just with CG creators was that there's a lot of relief in my heart and soul in my mind that I got told no over and over and over and over by DC, Marvel, Top Cow, Image, CrossGen, Dark Horse. Everybody in creation at some point told me no many, many times. And even though it hurt at the time and it got frustrating, um, it didn't deter me from moving forward. I still knew I was good. I just wasn't good enough yet, but I knew I was good. So, because those guys told me no for so long, eventually when the opportunities did come and people in CG did appreciate what I brought to the table art wise, the thought of being stuck in the pro world in 2016, 15 to 2022 sounds awful. It sounds absolutely miserable. Those are a bunch of people I don't see eye to eye with on hardly anything in life. Their books are almost all awful and terrible, and I would not want my name put on any of these things. If you said you get to draw Batman, but it's Tom King's going to write it, I would pass. I'd say that's okay. I will pass. Let some other guy do it. That's just depressing. I'm not gonna work on something that's is high end and cool as Batman, and know it's gonna have to be some lame cucked ass Batman story. I'm not gonna participate in that slander. So that's God kept me away from these people. I am 100% sure of it.
Was it a difficult path though to have to go through all that rejection and loss of work to
Oh,
eventually come here where you belonged?
at times, at times, but it made me a better person and a better artist. So that's the hard part. When you have hindsight, you see the all the advantages that you did not notice at the time. So yeah, even though it really sucks sometimes, or it was tough watching like family members that had all the faith in the world of me have to keep finding out that I got told no again. It's you don't want to have to face people all the time with that. It's not fun when the people around you are excited for you honestly, and you never have anything to show for it in a big way. So I definitely got to a point around like 2016 where I was like, do you keep at this? You've been at this since you were a little boy. You have had one goal in mind, and it was to make comic books, and you've never strayed from it. And even though you are making comic books, it's not at the scale you want. Do you throw, at that point, it would have been about 35 years I'd been alive. Do I throw all that down the drain, or do I keep at it because I've already sank this much time into it. It's like the time sank into it was equal good and bad. It was bad because I probably could have been making more money doing other things in that same time period, or it's a bunch of really good experience I've gained. And now maybe I can do something better with it. So I had to think that stuff out for a little bit at one point because it got to a point where me and Shane, my business partner Shane Mess, we were just opening like comic book shops and stuff. Because I remember we'd go to cons and stuff, and I was like, after talking to editors for 18 years at cons and submitting and all that kind of stuff, I was like, man, they just don't want us. Like the industry's changed. It's moved on. What they consider good is not good. What they consider hireable talent is just it's not what we consider that. So if we still want to be involved, the least we can do is sell comics. But while that's fine for some people, it just turns into a retail job. It gets to a point where it's no different than like working at Walmart or something. And that's not to denigrate the job, because I've worked plenty of terrible jobs in my life. Um, but it becomes that same feeling where it's just a drudge. You're just selling stuff that you can't even care about or be interested anymore because you've been irritated by it for so long.
It's
So
not what you trained for and pursued your whole life. So
yeah, it wasn't fun for me, and not that I expected it to necessarily be fun, but it was an experience that was making me hate things I love. So I was like, I don't want to do this either. After years of having shops and stuff, I was like, I'm tapping out on this. This is just making me hate things I used to enjoy. And there's enough of that in the world. I don't want to dislike things that I like. And I don't want to be put in a position where that's going to happen either way.
and if they would have said yes to you in the mainstream back then, you would have had a lot of family members maybe be happy for you, but it could have corrupted you ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes if I would have been put in a position where I was working with a bunch of liberals and I was still a young man when most people are still a little bit more liberal mindset, and it's not exactly like they can help it. It's just the way things are presented to you when you're young. It sounds better on paper and seems to make more sense. Um, yeah, the thought of me being like an ultra liberal West Coast acting comic book person just it sounds awful. So the thought of having to be that insufferable is just terrifying. So I'm glad I never got that deep into it for a lot of those reasons, because these
Hmm.
are just not people I would have been compatible with in the long run.
It sounds like you feel like you preserved your morality and integrity, not necessarily your art or your craft, by having to by being able to avoid those experiences working in those industries.
Well, yeah, because I probably would have still drawn relatively similar or the same. Like that wouldn't have really probably been a huge issue. But yeah, there's no way if I was working in the pro industry I could have been able to honestly stand behind the things we've seen happen with comic books the last 8 or 10 years. Because I saw a lot of this stuff coming just from working at a shop and owning a comic shop before um, Richard kind of brought it to the forefront in the early CG days. So, I had a lot of connections with different editors and stuff at studios just from meeting them at cons and stuff like that. So some people were easier access where I could send artwork to them and get their takes or their opinions on it. But I had reached out to some guys at some of the smaller studios who's like writers and artists were just going like liberal insulting nuts at the fans on Twitter, even in 2014 and 15, and being like, "Yo, man, it's hard enough to move these books. Like literally, some of the stuff I'm just ordering out of loyalty to your company because I love your work. But it's not like people are buying these things up. It's me being like I'm a fanboy, so I'm going to try to keep it around and coax people on it." And I said, but it's hard to do when I have to look like because I set up a Twitter account thinking it was like all the other social medias, like, oh, it'll help get the word out on the comic book shop. I'll look up all these comic book people to follow so I can keep track of what's going on outside of just the books. Like, so my finger's on the pulse. And all I find are dudes being total pricks and assholes to regular people. And that was like my first kind of eye opener to it, where it's like I'm hitting up editors being like, yo, what's this guy's problem? Why is he talking down to people that are literally trying to tell him, we love your work? But could you please not accuse all of us of hating polar bears because of we don't agree with your climate change ideas or something? Like, guys were just already getting terrible back then. It was just easier to get away with because a lot of fans, I would notice, would get hurt and just kind of walk away, because there'd be a point they'd reach where no matter how much they tried to re-explain themselves to certain creators would just trash them right there in public. People they don't even know, people they've never met, that if they were at a convention, they would not be speaking to people that way. They would not. It wouldn't happen. And it was only because there were screens in between them that they felt the comfort level to do this stuff. And I mean, Ron Mars was like one of the biggest purveyors of it even back then. So he's been a prick for years. And it's like, how am I supposed to sell a bunch of Witchblade books that aren't even that good anymore with his name slabbed all over them, when every time I turn on Twitter, he's having a shit fit on somebody? It doesn't make things any easier for a retailer. So, and I mean, I know we all have our days. I'm not judgmental of someone that has an outburst or two on Twitter. I think it's bound to happen occasionally. But there's got to be a point where someone reels them back in, and says, hey, just chill out a little bit. You don't got to like be a parent to them, but it's like, just calm down a little and maybe not be so aggressive with people you don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting then to think that CG is kind of like the chill zone where people do chill out on the customers. They're not projecting a superiority complex like what you're describing with Ron Mars. But at the same time, we still have our problems here. There's still drama and beefs that happen. It's just you at least get to maintain your integrity and your moral convictions. You don't have to corrupt yourself.
Yeah, there's always going to be like beefs and weird issues, especially in communities where a lot of people have egos and things like that, because it's going to happen. It's unhelpable to some degree. But you do your best to navigate it and just avoid it. It's possible to avoid. And if people just keep their emotions in check, usually that stuff will just pass over and nobody will even know the difference. If I got uptight every time somebody came at me cross, I'd have all kinds of issues. I'm not going to give it air.
How unfortunate is it that we have so many beefs, even though we all kind of have very similar moral convictions and viewpoints, but still manage to fight with each other?
Well, people can agree on a lot of things, and one disagreement about something minor can change all that, unfortunately. And sometimes things aren't as minor as they seem. You don't, unless you're privy to every conversation or everything that's ever happened with some of these situations, you're either getting a full story, a partial story, a made up story, a half story. The customer doesn't know which one they're getting, and that's just kind of part of the deal. And that's like that no matter what you're involved with, if it's an industry that has a lot of egos in it.
Right. Elasmat the Shadow Band says he came for Gail Simone and instead he got Joe Ball.
Yeah, well, Gail Simone's not with us any longer. She retired when YouTube got to a point where you can't say anything fun without getting other people's channels struck. So I'm not going to risk other people's platforms to be a goofball.
Yeah, that's because this is now people's livelihood.
Yeah,
they're not behind a desk with a contract from some big company. they're on these little channels speaking to their customers directly, hoping to sell books.
Yeah, and some
So
of these people are, they're good friends, and even if they're not good friends, you don't want to do things that are going to affect them like that. It's just rude. If they want you to, they'll tell you. If they don't care, they'll tell you, I don't care. But yeah, overall, you wanna be a good boy for other people, because generally those are people you're going to work with, or you are working with, or you're friends with. So
hmm. Speaking of friends, here's Black Rose Comics. He says, "Hail Joe Ball."
oh, hey, B Rose.
He's got a pretty cool looking book. So
Hmm. Yeah, I think it looked awesome. I'm excited to get it.
yeah, small creator rising in the ranks. There's a lot of opportunities for that in CG as well. That's a really great thing here.
Yep, it
Um,
is. It's I'd say that's the best thing probably about CG, and probably the thing I don't want to say people take for granted, but maybe they just need to keep it in mind, is it's the only corner of comics where anybody can give it a shot, and we all kind of have a similar opportunity to be heard and to show what we're bringing to the table. There's a plethora of shows that will host people, no matter how new or not new you are, and there's always people that are willing to do the best they can to aid creators and help them out, like you are right now. You're letting me talk. This is your time. You're not charging me for this time of yours, and there's nothing we have that's any more valuable than time. So, yeah, don't take it for granted, people. There's I've been around comics for nearly 25 years now, and there's never been anything like CG in comics, no matter what phase that I've at least had experience in. And it's a special thing because of that. No matter what people's takes are, no matter the beefs, blah blah blah, any of that horse shit, there has never been a phase in comics where anybody can bring their thing to the world and they have a very high chance of it getting seen by a lot of people in a short period of time. You don't have to go kill yourself over going to cons and going broke trying to spend the money it takes for hotels and airplanes and travel and shipping and booths like and that wasn't even effective in the first place. Like, you'd have to do cons for like 20 and 30 years for it to even be effective, but that was your only option. We're in a golden age. Printing's cheaper than ever. Getting merchandise made is cheaper than ever. Labor's more expensive, but that's because the demand is up, and that's acceptable. Um, but we're for people that haven't been around it for a long time, just know from a guy that has been around it for a long time, you're in a golden age of print. You're in a golden age of Western comics that we haven't seen in ages. And even though it's maybe not comparable with some of the other booms or some things of the past, it's better than anything else we've had in the last 20 years. Take advantage of it, make the best of it, because on this level, it may not be around forever. It could be something that gets more secluded over time. So do your best to make your waves while you can, because you never know how long these golden ages will last, and you want to solidify yourself while they're red hot, so that you can still be successful after it's not red hot.
yeah, it's one of the most flourishing moments for creative opportunities in the history of comics. It's, the barrier for entry is very low. You network.
Exactly.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
network
and
a
that
little bit, you get on the shows.
and long-term networking pays off in CG, or at least the CG realm. People kind of like in our little circle. I'll say you can throw Fandom Menace, the the celebrity talkers like Tug or Yellow Flash, uh, the anime side of it, because there is a good chunk of anime community that's kind of in on this now that have discovered CG through other avenues. There's this little chunk of conservative-esque, right-leaning internet creatives, and everyone's got a shot right now if you really want to do this stuff. It's never happened before. There's no, even when Image was booming, and everybody was making comics for a while, even at the indie scale, and guys like Dave Sim and Kevin Eastman and stuff, just their stuff was taking off. That was a cool glory phase, but they didn't have the luxury of being able to like crowd fund a book in 30 days. You know, they were working full-time jobs for a long time to make enough money to just print in black and white and get their stuff out to shops and stuff. So a credit to people like that were really successful in a time where it was much harder to get the word out about your book, you know, and the long-term networking in CG does pay off eventually. I mean, I've known Yellow Flash and I've known Tug since day one of CG, since like late 2016. So even though we've never had really big creative endeavors together, I've just done a little bit of work for him here and there. We've always known of each other, and um, he's sent work my way over the years, and now he's kind enough to give me a little time on his platform and stuff like that, and it's really helped get a bunch of eyes on my book that would have never gotten it. You know, people that I would have never gotten to show this to. And I can say that about a lot of people in CG. It's not just him. It's all varieties of people that are in our little realm of the internet that each kind of have like crossover audiences, but they also have their own audience that's specific to them. It's kind of like that, you know, 60-40 split. And
Right.
you can reach little parts of them. You know, I've kept good relationships with almost everybody. There's a handful of people I didn't, but it was like, you know, circumstances beyond my control.
Right.
But most of the people I've met, I've gotten along with at least on a face value level. And when you need to call in a favor, you know, if you're good to people, they'll be good back. Status hierarchy and totem pole stuff doesn't always matter when people just like you because you've never had a problem with them and you've always gotten along with them. So it's helped a lot. I don't want to take anything away from that. Like Nick Rekieta getting me some airtime, Yellow Flash, Tug, Phil Diaz for years now. Um, just a lot of guys. There's tons of YouTubers that have given me airtime. I probably do 15 hours of YouTube a week. People wouldn't know it, but it's because I just show up wherever with whoever. You know, it's fun to do, even though it's work.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that believe in this community. That's why they commit so much of their time and effort to helping ensure its success.
Yeah.
As you said, I get nothing for this, and I have commitments, but I make time and I dedicate time, and I try to do something that's constructive and helpful as much as possible. Because I want to see it flourish. I want to see it thrive. It's
And that's good because we need people for that too. You know, it's I don't think people value enough the fact that we get airtime for free from so many guys in CG. It's like you're not going to get this level of exposure for free anywhere else. You're going to pay for this in any other realm of entertainment. So be glad this is not normal. We're just setting new standards over here.
Elseed is here to remind us of what's truly important. He says, "Elf well read." And Black Rose Comics. Thank you, Joe and well read. Editing for Cerebrum has wrapped up and colors have begun. We can quickly show B Rose's campaign. People are welcome to go check that out. Maybe pick up a copy.
Yeah.
So 206 backers, 11K raised already. He's putting in the legwork.
Good job, B Rose.
Yeah. The art looks great.
It does. It does. It looks like a really fun book. It looks high quality and it looks original. And those are all criteria that are good enough for me.
I just want to say thank you for offering a digital because, like, for somebody who does a review channel, digitals are like such a load off of my shoulders. It's so much easier to like put together a review when you have a digital copy, whereas the physical ones make everything just more difficult. So thank you, B Rose. I'll probably be picking up a copy and we'll probably do a review if we can schedule it in.
Yeah, and once that is done, I'll hook you up on all that stuff, brother.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. That
And if
helps.
you have to, don't hesitate to remind me. You know, 5 months from now, when it's around December, when I'm getting the book out. If you need any PDFs just for review purposes, or you need copies of any of the books, just tell me and I'll shoot it right over to you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
John De La Rose is asking, is this the drama portion yet? Yes, that was the drama just now, of Joe and I bonding over digital copies. So
Oh my
I hope
God. But
I
it
hope
was
that was
true bonding.
that was enough drama for John. Wilberforce points out that nobody's been drinking, so that's why there's no amped up drama. Yeah, I guess we hit all the questions in the chat, and yeah, we covered a lot of topics tonight. So it's been great speaking with you, Joe. Thank
Oh,
you.
likewise, man. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's always a pleasure to have you on. And like guilty, you know, full disclosure confession, you're probably one of my favorite CG creators. I really dig your art style, and I look forward to your future work. So it's
Well, thank you very
something,
much. I appreciate that.
yeah, something very unique in CG, and hopefully something that catches on and more people back it. Wilberforce points out that, yeah, well, Red has to sit and ask stupid questions when he doesn't have digitals. Right. That's that's very true. OC Steve says, "Oh no, the uptight ginger might come back to private stream all his shit." Yawn. Hmm. Well, we'll see about that. So the jury's
No,
still out.
he always comes back.
Can't stay
It's
awake.
yeah, it's without a doubt at some point.
Can't quit us.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I guess I might do an after stream for people if they wanted to have a chance to jump in and get a chance to talk. But as far as this interview, I'll probably bookend it here and wish Joe best of luck until we get to meet again on a stream sometime in the future. I did want to ask, as in terms of like when people contract you for work, is there a condition where people would contract you to do character designs for a book they're developing?
I mean, it's a request I get, but I generally don't accept too many of them
Mm-hmm.
unless it's like a favor for a friend, because I hate doing character sheets. They're so boring, and it's something too that involves usually a more refined editing process. You rarely get exactly what somebody wants the first time, especially when they're not even sure what they want, and it's just a bunch of shit that's never worth the amount of money. So like basically what I do is if someone asks for that service, I give them an insane quote, and if they honestly want to pay that, then I'll do it because it's worth it for me. But that quote's really just to avoid doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
uh I don't particularly like doing it. You can only draw so many guys just standing there before you want to lose your goddamn mind. And it's even though it's like, yeah, it's a character sheet, you want just clear images of what they look like. It's like, I know, but I've been doing this for 20 some years, and I've drawn 10 zillion dudes just standing there in Jim Lee pose, and I hate it, and it's boring, and I can't get enthusiastic about it. So, and that's even on my own stuff. Like if you said sit down and draw like perfect character designs for all of Death, I'd be like, sounds miserable. I've got more than enough sketches and concepts and everything laid down that I know what I want. I don't need to do that. It's not worth the trouble unless it's for something else related to it where I do have to do it. So, it's terrible to do. Not to poo poo everyone that likes doing that stuff or wants that kind of a service. It's just I hate doing them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if it's something that people like writers, for example, can ask artists to do because it seems like something that a writer would need at some point. But then, like, do they have to share the rights when they work with an artist on a character design, or does the artist
They
just
don't
do the design and hand it over? And
they don't
that's it.
have to do anything. It just depends on what kind of contract you sign. If I'm a person where if it's a work for hire and it's a one-off, that's fine. Once I know everyone's different, but for me personally, that part of it's just a job. And it's the same as any other job. Once I finish the job, I'm done with the job. I don't have any thought about it after that because I've got too many other things to do. So um it's you have to work that out with whoever you want to do it. I don't think most guys are going to ask for that, but it could just depend on who you're working with. I don't know. I personally, it's not something I care about that much. So if people ask me to do a design, I do it. And once I'm finished, it's theirs. I've got no care of what they do with it from that point on. It's completely up to them.
Okay, cool. So we'll look forward to your future projects. Death, Death, Death is in demand. I'll quickly show the campaign.
Thank you, sir.
708 backers, 55K raised. That ain't cheap. So this is definitely one of CG's heavy hitters. People should definitely go check this out. Back it. And I recommend getting both. Get the line art and the colored. That's my advice to you. You won't be sorry.
Yeah, and the manga is going to be in grayscale if you want one other toned version just to look at. It's going to be a little different. It'll even be lettered different just because the space is different. You have to make some of the lettering bigger. So you'll see different kind of like I guess you could say like graphic design aspects for each one because I have to treat each one a little different. There's things with like lettering that work in the color one that don't work in the black and white, and things that work in the black and white that don't work in the color. And that goes in the grayscale too for the manga. So all three books are a little different. All three books have a little different tone. Yeah, the verbiage and the art's the same, but it's a graphic design styled setup that is different from each one.
Cool. Yeah, this is one that everybody's going to want to back at the highest tier. So go and check it out, guys. All right. I guess with that, Joe, thank you so much for joining us. It's great talking with you.
Hey, great talking with you too, man.
And yeah, appreciate the time. And everyone, have a good night. And we'll see you next week.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.